Republican Senator John Cornyn of the great state of Texas, member of the Foreign Relations, Judiciary, Intelligence, and Finance Committees, was briefed this morning about Nicolas Maduro's arrest and the current situation in Venezuela. So we want an update. Good to see you. Senator, what is that update?
Well, first of all, Harris, I couldn't be more proud of the efforts of the U.S. Law enforcement officials and the intelligence community and the U.S. military that pulled off an extraction of this indicted criminal from this compound in Caracas, Venezuela, and brought him to justice in a federal court in New York. No other government in the world could possibly have pulled that off. But obviously, there's a lot of questions that remain unanswered and that are going to have to be answered as this thing progresses.
What are your thoughts on these other countries now, Colombia, Mexico, in terms of, quote unquote, cleaning up the Western Hemisphere?
Well, I think President Trump got their attention. And we want to continue to see the forces of democracy and self-government and the free enterprise expand, particularly in these countries that have known nothing but dictators and people who are being repressed, not only by their own government, but by criminal enterprises in collaboration with our adversaries around the world, China, Russia, Cuba, and Iran. And so this is the beginning of hopefully a new day for South America and for the Western Hemisphere in a way I think that will benefit the vast majority of the population.
Senator Cornyn, do you think we're seeing come into focus now a little bit more about oil, that 30 to 50 million barrel give up that Venezuela will have to do? What are you learning about that? What can you share?
Well, somebody's got to pay the bills. And right now, the economy of Venezuela depends on oil sales. But of course, under Maduro, the proceeds of that were diverted to these criminal enterprises and to people who were corrupt. What I would hope is that this oil produced by Venezuela would be available, the proceeds of that be available for Venezuelans as they begin a new dawn in their history. So the bills need to be paid, and that seems like an obvious source.
Yeah, and that's consistent with what at least some of the writing has come out, and some of what we're reading is that would be for the Venezuelan people and then also for the United States in terms of what's due. A new opinion piece is calling out the left's hypocrisy. And here's a quote. "So now Democrats are mad that Trump ousted a dictator?" In one excerpt, "I am getting very tired of the left reflexively questioning Trump when he does something that garners applause from world leaders and the very people most affected, most oppressed, Venezuelans." Some top Democrats were going after President Trump over Maduro's capture, even after they had supportedly, well, they would have loved it had it been a different president. Here's Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer.
And the president brags about his Venezuela policy? Give us a break. He hasn't brought an end to the Maduro regime.
This is, first, it is reckless, it is dangerous. Whenever our country has gotten involved in this kind of regime change and nation building, American families pay the price in blood and treasure.
Lying then, lying now. Well, there's more. Senate Foreign Relations Committee Democrat, somebody that you would know, actually, Senator Chris Murphy here. In 2019, he posted if Trump cared about consistency, he would make the realest case for intervention in Venezuela. Getting rid of Maduro is good for the United States. And this weekend, his tune changed to the invasion of Venezuela has nothing to do with American security and called it fundamentally corrupt. What is going on? Senator.
Well, you're seeing a world-class flip-flop by Democrats that supported the elimination of Maduro as the illegitimate president of Venezuela. But now that President Trump has actually done it, now they're opposed to it. And it's shocking to me because Maduro had I believe it was up to a $50 million reward available for people who would help to return him to the United States where he could stand in front of a federal court and be held accountable for his crimes. So it's nothing but pure hypocrisy and flip-flop, a double standard. But I think we've come to expect that from my Democratic colleagues when it comes to Donald Trump and his administration.
Look, I'm glad you brought up the reward money because it's important. So the indictment of Maduro happened under Trump's first term.
Right.
And so that was pre-existing to President Biden. He did nothing to try to catch that dictator in his 4 years. In the last 10 days, on January 10th of 2020, the last 10 days of Biden's presidency, he took the then $15 million reward and bumped it to 25, as if to say, I've done what I can. And it got to 50 under Trump in recent months. I believe it was August, and then the capture of Maduro. I mean, they had years to try to implement this. Why didn't they do it?
Well, because all they were is talk. And President Trump is a man of action. People are learning that when he says he's going to do something, he actually does it, which I know comes as a surprise to the chattering classes here in Washington, D.C. But that's the reason he was elected, and I think he's following through on his commitments. And I couldn't be more proud, again, of the combined efforts of our intelligence community, law enforcement, and military. But it takes a commander-in-chief who's willing to call the shots. And that's what President Trump did.
Look, Senator Cornyn, I think about all the people, the Americans who died while fentanyl was flowing, and cocaine and other drugs flowing across our border. And Biden opened that border even more and more and more every year of his presidency. Killing Americans in the process is what Maduro and others, cartels, were doing. And he didn't stop it. All right, I want to talk with you about an hour that we spent yesterday watching the president live here on the Faulkner Focus lay out a plan for Republicans to beat Democrats in the midterm elections. First of all, he said he gave them a handbook. That was the House side. How necessary do you think this is as Democrats are going around bragging about the fact that they can win in November?
Well, history is not on the administration's side. As you know, midterm elections are notoriously tough on the majorities in the House in particular, and with the razor-thin majority that Speaker Johnson has now, this is going to be a fight for the majority. And I know that President Trump's right. He said the Democrats will try to impeach me again. This will be the third time if they're successful. But there's more at stake than that. And that is to restore the safety of our streets, the prosperity of our economy, and to deal with things like kitchen table issues that affect working families in Texas and across the United States. I know that's what the focus of the president is on. The One Big Beautiful Bill, the Working Family Tax Cuts Act, did a lot of good things to make real good progress in each of those areas, and we'll be talking more about that. And we would invite our Democratic colleagues to work with us, but right now it seems like all they are focused on is the midterm elections and trying to defeat President Trump and his administration.
I mean, it's just so much Trump derangement syndrome if they go after him for a third impeachment, because you know in the Senate, you're not going to pass that.
No, absolutely not.
All right, we are waiting for Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, to step up to the lectern. And before I let you go, I just want a quick thought. This is a huge day as we find out more about what happens in our Western Hemisphere. Give us a headline.
Well, we should all be proud. We should be proud of the leadership of this administration under President Trump, but more importantly, the combined efforts of our intelligence community, law enforcement officials at the Department of Justice, and our military that pulled off something that nobody thought, especially President Maduro, was possible. And I think it's a new day for the people of Venezuela and for South America and for the Western Hemisphere. And of course, it takes the leadership of somebody like President Trump to begin that effort. So it's a good day.
It's a good day for the whole hemisphere. Senator Cornyn, great state of Texas. Good to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Harris.